Hello, everyone. Great. So I'm here with Minister of Zimbabwe, Minister Mavima, and Minister of Nigeria, Minister of Education, Anwukah. Did I say it right?
Thank you,
yeah. Yes. So thank you for coming, everyone. Let's begin with just a quick introduction about yourselves and about the country. So let's begin with you.
Okay. My name is Paul Mavima. I am a specialist in public policy, taught in various places, including Zimbabwe and here in the United States. And I've been Minister of Education for about 1 year and 3 months. Prior to that, I was Deputy Minister for 4 years. I come from a country that is in Southern Africa with about 16 million people, about 9,000 schools, primary and secondary schools, 6,500 primary schools, about 2,500 secondary schools, a student population of about 4,500,000. The majority of which are obviously in the primary education segment. We pride ourselves in being one of the best education systems in Africa. Something like 92.5% literacy rate for adult population. But we face quite a number of challenges in order to bring that education sector into the 21st century. Issues of making sure that we are innovative enough as an economy, so emphasizing STEM education, but also making sure that all our schools have access to modern technology. And one of the biggest challenges is how do we connect all our schools? So these are some of the issues that we're dealing with. We are talking about language. Here we have 16 officially recognized languages in Zimbabwe, including sign language. A lot of them are very small, but the government has taken a stance to promote the development of all those languages. As an introduction, that's what I would say.
Great. Minister?
Yeah, I'm Professor Tony Anwukah. I'm the Minister of State for Education in Nigeria. Before joining the Federal Executive Council, I was a Vice Chancellor of Imo State University in the eastern part of Nigeria. Soon after that, I became the secretary to the Imo State government, served them for about 4 years before joining the Federal Executive Council. Well, Nigeria is a very large country. When we talk about student population, it's supposed to be about half the population of students in Africa in Nigeria. So you can know what the problem is. We have a total of about 40 federal universities, about 65 state-run universities, and about 100 private universities. And the states, we have 36 states in Nigeria, plus Abuja, the federal capital, making it 37. And each state is as large as any African country, any other African country you can think about. So we have almost 36 nations put together to form the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And as large as we are, that's as big as our problems, educational problems are. We have a total of about 120 or thereabout native languages in Nigeria. And English is the official language. We have three major Nigerian languages other than English, which is spoken across the whole breadth of Nigeria. In the north, we have Hausa language. In the west, we have Yoruba language. And in the east, we have Igbo language. And these three languages are studied in the secondary schools and up to university level. You can take your PhD degree in any of the three languages. And that's all for now, until we have more.
So I will stay with you. In Baltimore, there was just an article published that Yoruba is the second most spoken language in the entire Baltimore district, and none of us knew that. So tell us about the support you're giving to the exodus, the large exodus in Europe and in the States.
Okay.
In Canada, a big one in Canada.
If they had a Senate that studied a little bit, they could have added a third language, Igbo, because I know in Baltimore, Igbo is extensively spoken, and in New York, New Jersey area, a lot of Igbo, and I think they have some schools, there's some arrangement for the children there to study Igbo language, so also Yoruba language, and maybe Hausa. So what happens is that students who have graduated from universities in the United States maybe get some jobs, and when they have their kids, they will try to promote the native languages as much as they can here in the United States of America. So, the government extends some help to the study of the languages by making sure that the three main languages in Nigeria, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, are studied, as I said earlier, up to doctoral degree level. So they have people who are proficient in teaching those subjects, and they're all over the world trying to help to make sure that the younger generation pick up the study of native languages wherever they are. Thank you.
Great. So I have to say that in all our experience in Africa, the best one was in Zimbabwe. It was such a delight to work with your teachers and the students and everything. There's obviously a lot of passion to bring the native languages back and to give them the importance they deserve. So in this year of native languages, can you tell us about why is Zimbabwe giving it so much importance?
Our perspective as Zimbabwe is that all our languages are important. They are important for a number of reasons. The first is the mere fact that every cultural aspect has an element of a human right or human affirmation tied to it. Almost like, the protocols of the United Nations that recognize the importance of various cultures. We as a nation have taken it upon ourselves also to recognize the fundamental importance of our cultural diversity. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is that we are a post-colonial society. During colonialism, there was, almost like divide and rule among the various ethnic groups, one being used against the other. And as we go into nation building in the post-colonial period, we need to really make sure that we affirm every aspect of our nation, Zimbabwe. This is why we have put it within our constitution, one that came into effect in 2013, to say we recognize officially all these languages, apart from sign language, and English. It means we have 14 indigenous languages that we are recognizing. So it's important in that matter. We cannot build this nation without affirming the various groups. And the Constitution is very clear. First of all, it recognizes the languages. Then secondly, it gives obligations to state institutions and agencies to say, these are certain things that you have to do in order to promote those languages. Make sure that in any communication, the preferences of those different groups, in the language preferences in of those groups is recognized and affirmed. So that's what we have done. Then, as a Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, we have further obligations that have been placed upon us by the Constitution to say we should arrange for the teaching and learning of the various languages in the various parts of the country that they are predominant. So we have put it in our curriculum to say, you know, if it's Ndebele or if it's Chewa. By the way, Chewa is a new language in Zimbabwe relatively because it came with immigrants who were coming to work in our mines and in our farms from Zambia and Malawi. But we have realized that they are now native Zimbabweans, and therefore we need to promote that. So, as a ministry, we have developed a curriculum for the various languages. We have promoted the production of content for teaching those languages. We have also taken a stance to train teachers in the various languages at various teachers training colleges, at universities, so that we have a cadre of teachers who can teach. We have also made sure that for the early childhood learning, the teaching has to be done in the mother tongue. That's now a requirement. And our early childhood learning starts officially at age 4. And age 5, then we have the first grade and second grade. All these are supposed to take place with the mother tongue, because we understand that comprehension is easier when at that level learners are taught in their mother tongue. So these are some of the efforts that we're putting in place in order to make sure that we preserve the languages, but we also develop them.
Great. Now, what kind of support do you give the local schools in order to preserve the languages?
Well, in Nigeria, we have an agency of government that helps develop the native languages. The Nigerian Educational Research Council. And they work in concert with the various universities, departments of languages and linguistics to enhance the development of the native languages. But the problem is only the 3 major Nigerian languages have developed the orthographies of the various languages. You cannot talk about developing the language up to the teaching level in the secondary schools or in the primary schools without developing the orthographies of those languages. And that's why it's difficult. Apart from these 3 that government took up early enough, have trained people up to the postgraduate level in those languages who can now draw up the curriculum for the primary schools, secondary schools, and even the universities for these other languages. So far, some other languages in Nigeria, as I said, there are about 120 native languages in Nigeria and more counting. So as they grow, as they mature, as they develop the orthographies, then the government can assist them through the agency, the Nigerian Educational Research Council, to develop those languages up to the teaching, learning level in the secondary schools. I know there was a policy in Nigeria, the mother tongue language thing, that students, pupils from the first 3 years of primary school are to be taught in their native languages. Yes, you can when you have the orthography developed, but it's apart from being a wish, we want to make sure that the 3 languages where the orthographies have been developed, we are doing very well in those ones. The curriculum has been developed, as I said, up to postgraduate level in those other areas. That is so far, but it's good, man. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's been one of the biggest challenges we found, that most of the, especially the smaller languages, they are mainly oral, orally transmitted. So we've had to help the communities build, develop the orthography and the grammar, hire language etymologists and anthropologists in order to help them build but it's very possible, it's very doable. When there is something in the constitution, like in Uganda and in Zimbabwe, it's a lot easier because then it's easier to bring it. Is there any intention, any possibility of adding it to the constitution, of doing something more formal in Nigeria?
For now, I think the government is comfortable with English as the official language,
yes, I know,
and doing very well with these 3 other languages. As you said, in oral discussions, maybe in TV programs, you can see some semblance of these other little languages coming up, but to the extent of being developed in the curriculum and taught as subjects in various areas, there's still plenty of work to be done until orthographies are developed. I think things will continue going this way for a while. But the thing is that the speakers of those languages are not willing to let go. They want to maintain their languages, speak it,
yes,
whether it is documented or officially or not, they speak them, and nobody's willing to let his language go extinct. That is what is keeping that is spirit.
So what you're saying is it's not going to be forbidden, but not necessarily invest in resources to help them develop unless it comes like from UNESCO or something like that, which now in this year they're doing a lot of that.
Yeah, and UNESCO is working, as I said, very much with the Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council to see what can be done,
yes,
for those other places. But there are no graduates in those languages, because it's not been officially documented. The orthographies have not been developed. Yes. So it's going to be a long time work in progress. And as I said, for now, Nigeria is a little bit more comfortable, a lot comfortable with the 3 languages and English as the official language. And we can make do with that for now, while the rest are trying to catch up and develop. But nobody's stopping them.
Yeah,
from doing
nobody's
that.
stopping them. Great. So let's go to a subject that we're super passionate about, and that is early childhood. Tell us about the status of early childhood. Maybe let's begin in Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe made a very conscious decision in 2004 to say we were going to mainstream early childhood education by adding 2 years to the primary school module called ECD-A, or Early Childhood Development A and Early Childhood Development B. So our children get into the education sector at 4 years old. And that first year is really pre-reading and pre-writing. They are taught just basic things through play, through, engaging with the teachers. And then at 5, they go into ECDB. That's when they start a little bit of writing and a little bit of reading before they proceed to the first grade. And with first grade and second grade, we have what we now call the infant module, which means ECDA, ECDB, grade 1 and grade 2. These form what we call the infant module. It's now a requirement before proceeding to grade 1 that every child should have passed through early childhood development. We are aware of international research that has indicated that ECD education, even here with Head Start, actually gives learners an opportunity that will make them more productive in adult life. And so that's why we have taken that stance. Since we started in 2004, at the moment, it's now understood and clearly adopted by all our communities that learners are supposed to start school at 4 and with ECD. In order to make sure that that is a reality, we developed a teacher training course for early childhood development. It starts at diploma level, but also opportunities for degree level training, and some are now taking master's courses in early childhood development. We had a little bit of a problem at the national policy level in terms of providing resources for hiring ECD teachers. And we had to continue to fight for resources to be released from Treasury in order to hire teachers. As we are speaking right now, we have a program to hire an additional 3,000 teachers. The majority of them are going to be ECD specialists who will go into our schools. We also took a stance to say, prior to getting the trained teachers, we took high school graduates and gave them crash courses on teaching at that level, and then put them in all our schools. So they are para-professional teachers. We have been holding fort before the nation had fully developed a cadre of teachers who could teach at that level. But I'm happy to say now we have the teachers. We are slowly integrating them into the system. And I would want to say that within the next 3 to 4 years, we'll have all professional teachers teaching at that level.
That's great. So one problem we're having here in the US is that the preschool teachers don't get paid the same as the K-12 teachers. Is that the case in Zimbabwe?
No. Once someone has been trained as a teacher, they get, remunerated based on the level of education that they have attained. If it's a diploma level, it doesn't matter whether it's an ECD diploma or a junior school diploma, they get remunerated the same. They will be differentiated based on the number of years that they have been teaching, and also whether they have attained a higher level qualification, like a degree or a master's degree. That is not to say that our teachers are happy, by the way. They are always complaining about remuneration, and we are always working to try and make sure that we improve the conditions of service of our teachers. But there is no differentiation based on the level at which they are teaching.
Great. So, Minister Anwukah, what's the situation in Nigeria?
The case in Nigeria is a little different from what is described. The states run primary, secondary education. The federal government has departments for early childhood education where policies are made. The government per se in Nigeria does not have schools established for primary education. Yeah, the states too don't. What happens is that it's an area run by almost NGOs and private individuals. Before now, it was run by missions, the various mission schools. They were responsible, set up pre-primary schools for that kind of thing, and they work on the Montessori models for most of those schools. The government, as I said, sets out policies and guidelines on how to operate those schools, but individuals and missions run them. As for the training, Nigeria has the National Certificate of Education, NCE, as a baseline for teaching at whatever level. And the NCE programs, they have pre-primary education programs. In the universities, they have the same thing. Even in the master's degree program, they have them. Some people specialize in the pre-education for their doctoral programs. But whether they will go back to teach in the pre-primary schools is a thing I don't know about, but they would prefer to be in the policy-making body and then list out policies and guidelines on how people will operate on those things. But the teachers are paid at par with their qualifications. Those who have specialized in pre-primary education in the NCE program are paid just like any other teacher in the primary school. And those who have their bachelors in that area are paid like any other person with whatever qualification in any subject area, teaching in secondary school. So the salary thing is there. But as I said, predominantly, that level of education in Nigeria is run by private individuals and mission schools.
So same question to you. Do they get paid the same, the preschool teachers versus the K-12 teachers?
The guidelines, the qualification, if you have NCE in pre-primary, you are paid like any other NCE in whatever subject area. The same thing with those who have their bachelors. Yes. Okay. But again, the thing is run by private individuals. And most often, for profit, those individual proprietors cut corners and may shortchange the teachers. But if the teachers complain to the body, the main body, then the government will intervene to make sure that the right thing is done.
Let's talk about technology. So we were very impressed in Zimbabwe with the access, the presence of technology in the schools. Tell us about, is that just the schools we worked with, or is this really global on the country level?
You were in Harare, which is the capital. I would say that maybe Harare, Bulawayo, and some of the smaller cities. Bulawayo is the second largest city. Yeah. In some of the smaller cities, the school districts there, I would say maybe 95% have adopted technology. Mm-hmm. There is a difference in terms of how updated that technology is. Some of them, especially the computers that you'll find in some of our schools are a bit dated. Our biggest worry really is in the division between urban and rural areas. There is a gap there. Most of our rural areas still don't have technology. Some still don't have electricity, let alone the computers, the gadgets that will be needed for a 21st century education, let alone connectivity to the internet. So a quick assessment that we did recently tells us that some of our provinces, we have 10 provinces, some of our provinces are at about 25% digitization. Whereas Harare and Bulawayo are almost at 100%. So my biggest challenge and what I'm always thinking about is how do I make sure that these rural areas, the remote areas, can catch up with the rest of the country and can catch up with the rest of the world. Because we are going to be producing human capital, not only for our countries if we want to be competitive, but we have to make sure that we are at the standards that are international. The development of our countries is going to need innovators, people who are savvy about current, emerging technologies. And we have, in order to have sufficient supply of that human capital, we have to make sure that no child is left behind. So I am thinking, how do we provide power, to some of our remote schools? How do we provide, the gadgets? And then how do we provide connectivity? Recently, I hear Rwanda has launched a satellite that will connect all their remote schools. And I feel left behind, I feel that Rwanda has actually leapfrogged into the future, and we are behind. We used to say we are the best in Africa. And I want to make sure that Zimbabwe is caught up to where we can provide technology to every part of the country, so that I don't leave a potential innovator who is in one of the remotest areas of the country. That's where we are. And, as I go around the world, I'm looking for partners who can help with resources, with ideas, with disruptive technology that can bring the rest of the country into the digital world.
Great. And in Nigeria, it was very impressive to see the penetration of mobile into the schools. So is there anything related to students bringing their own phones or their own tablets into the schools, and resources being given to the students?
Well, the ICT education in Nigeria is a very encouraging work in progress. This year is a lot better than what it was last year. There's a lot of progress being made thanks to Microsoft and some ITC providers who have come recently to help. In my very recent outings, I have always insisted with those ICT providers that a change in policy in Nigeria is no longer a question of having to ask the ministry or ask me each time I attend international fora to go and budget and come back and buy ready-made equipment and programs for ICT in Nigeria. My advocacy position has been, if you are an RTC provider, please come to Nigeria, partner with us so that we develop programs that have local content and local input. And I think since the last 2 years, the response has been enormous. Our colleges of education, our universities are very much involved in the ICT project, and I feel encouraged. I feel we're doing well, unlike what it used to be in the past. And students are very enthusiastic about it. The programs are being run in the secondary schools and in the universities. We have graduates, teacher graduates who are specializing in ICT, and we have ICT departments in all the ministries of education, both federal and state in Nigeria. And as I said, it is some encouraging work in progress being done in Nigeria in the ICT sector. Thank you.
Great. So if we were to identify a key challenge for each of you, what would that be? Like, what is the biggest challenge, the one thing that's keeping you up at night?
The ICT program is at the heart of the wishes of government to impart on the students. But as he said, power, making sure that electricity in the rural areas to be able to power the ICT projects is another thing. So power, energy, electricity in the rural areas. There's a lot of tablets being distributed to the students in the various primary schools and secondary schools, but how do you power those things? So energy is a lot more of a problem. And where the personnel are being developed in the universities are doing wonderful jobs in it. And then the UNICEF is involved, and the World Bank is involved, and Microsoft, as I said earlier, is involved. So many of the ICT providers are trying to encourage us to move on, but there's some inhibiting things, like, as I said, power, energy, to power the ICT projects in the various rural areas. But in the towns, they're doing very well, but we can't go on isolating the people in the rural areas who don't have energy power to power their ICT ventures. Thank you.
Great. So everybody were using Slido.com to add your questions. So if you would like to add questions, just go on Slido.com and go to the hashtag SXSW EDU. So how about for you? What's the challenge, the biggest problem that's keeping you up at night?
It's, for me, it's the equalization of opportunity. And it expresses itself in many different forms. That rural-urban divide, it's, it's the infrastructure in the rural areas. It's not from, the learning rooms, just the physical infrastructure. It's not the same. And infrastructure speaks to the quality of education. It also speaks to the quality of life for the teachers who are in those areas. It's, an equal opportunity for STEM education, for example. The urban areas have all the science labs. They have the TVET workshops, but most of the rural areas don't have that. Then we go to the issues that my colleague minister was talking about, the ICT conditions that you find in the rural areas are completely different from those that you find in the urban areas. So it's this equalization of opportunity where we are saying, how do we generate and gather and garner enough resources so that we can equalize opportunity. Remember, education has positive externalities. When one consumes education, the benefits go beyond themselves and their families, but they affect the entirety of the community. If you don't provide enough from a public sector perspective, then the family in the remote area are not going to have adequate resources to then provide for their children's education. So we have to do enough as countries to provide, especially for those disadvantaged areas, so that learners have access in the same manner that learners in urban areas, in the richer areas of the country, have access. Without doing that, then we are losing out on many potential engineers, doctors, innovators, the critical thinkers that we'll need in order to transform our communities. So that's my biggest worry, how to generate enough national resources to be deployed into the education sector. And we can create conditions for a human capital that will transform our nations.
Great. So before we go to questions, I'd like to ask about gender equality. We know Nigeria went through a very public scandal with the girls that were kidnapped from school. Tell us about the difference between boys and girls and educational attainment.
Well, equal access is stressed in Nigerian education. Even though sometimes, unfortunately, some religious extremists in the north attacked one of the schools and kidnapped some of the girls in Chibok. That doesn't reflect the exact picture of what it is in Nigeria. Okay. Girls and boys have equal opportunities, but because some religious bigots somewhere thinking that they can set the clock back, but we've overgrown that now. We're moving ahead. Boys and girls have equal educational opportunity in Nigeria. Access to education is liberalized so that those who want education will have it. As we were talking about RCT projects, what the federal government did recently is to establish model technical secondary schools everywhere else in every senatorial zone in the country, and to serve as models for states to emulate. Because as I said earlier, states run primary and secondary education. Even some aspects of the tertiary. We have state universities. So there are models that are set out in the rural areas to afford opportunities to anybody from the rural area who wants to have meaningful access to technical education. So we stress equal access and gender equality in our education in Nigeria. Nobody is left behind because of gender. And we are seriously dealing with those bigots, religious bigots who wanted to disrupt women education in Nigeria. And that won't stop us. We're moving ahead. Education is given to all and sundry in Nigeria without regard to gender. So we're doing quite well. Thank you.
How about Zimbabwe? Any discrepancy?
Our statistics are showing that in terms of the gender parity index, we are almost on one at the primary school level, as well as at the secondary school level, even the pre-college level. The last 2 years of high school, we are almost one-on-one. In terms of performance, the recent results for what is known as the grade 7 examination, which is the examination that learners take before they transition to secondary education. Girls did better, and they have done better for the past few years than the boys. At secondary level, that is after the first 4 years, girls also did better there. But the latest results for the pre-college examination, boys did better there than the girls. Our biggest worry is not so much the gender disparity. What we have witnessed recently is that our transition statistics into secondary education from primary education are worrying. There are a lot of dropouts at that level. And then there are things like premature, parenthood, girls getting married prematurely, maybe 14, 15, some are married there. So there is a big campaign in the country to say, let's keep our children in school, let's avoid premature parenthood. There's also, some problems we have had with even boys who prematurely want to jump into some economic activities before they finish school. There are places where there is, small-scale mining, artisanal mining, and the lure of, making quick buck has meant that some learners have left school at 14, 15 to join these mining activities, and this has affected mainly the boys, especially in the southern parts of the country. So those are some of the issues we have been dealing with. There are some cultural aspects that have disadvantaged girls. There are some religious aspects that have also disadvantaged girls, and these we have always been trying to fight in order to make sure that the girl child has equal opportunity to attain education as the boy child. And our statistics are showing that we are almost at par, except we have issues related to transition from primary to secondary education.
Great. I'm going to read one of the questions, and this would be to you, Minister Mavima. Is it really economically viable to support multiple native languages given a limited population despite the cultural importance?
You know that on matters that are democratic, on matters that have to do with nation building, sometimes you have to forego economic efficiency. And it's a truism everywhere in the world that such matters don't necessarily operate on the basis of, economic efficiency. You want to avoid certain things that could be disruptive in the future when some groups feel neglected. And that the nation is not paying attention to, things that have to do with their own cultural, their own traditional, their own language issues. So there's a way in which a nation can sacrifices in order to make sure that there is cohesion, that everyone feels affirmed, and as a result, you actually build a nation. So this is how I see these issues of promotion of the various languages. There is a, unlike the situation that my colleague minister described in Nigeria, most of our languages are actually regional in nature. Some of the minority languages in Zimbabwe are majority languages in neighboring states. Tswana, for example, is the dominant language that is spoken in Botswana. Yeah. And Kalanga, which is a minority in Zimbabwe, is the second largest in Botswana. And therefore, the development of that language in terms of teaching and learning is a function of, collaboration between Botswana and Zimbabwe. So it makes it a little bit easier. Xhosa is predominant in South Africa, is also in Zimbabwe. Ndebele is like Zulu, it's almost the same as Zulu. So South Africa and Zimbabwe can collaborate in the development of those languages. So there are issues that say we go beyond just economic considerations. National symbols, traditions need to be promoted, even in light of some of the economic inefficiencies that may be associated with those things.
Yes. And in that light, I'd love to show some of the questions. So we're learning a lot in the global collaboration, and I think there's a big opportunity in technology to help in the development of the languages. And the main reason we got into it was because the big monsters, the McGraw-Hills and the Pearson declined a lot of the bids because it's not economically viable to print books in all these languages, but technology is pretty easy to build. So the kids collaborate here, children from, they ask questions to each other from Zimbabwe to Botswana to the United States. So you have children really collaborating with each other. And I'm gonna give you a surprise. Shona is one of the languages that the kids have built. And to see all the content that the teachers and the curriculum developers and the language boards have been building on their own. Here's one of them done by the kids. This is kindergarten, so maybe we can show that one. It's actually one of the top ones on February 21st was the day of native languages, yeah. and they won. And you'll see why, because it's the best thing ever. this is the community building their own content, and the students taking pride in their own music, their own storytelling, and their own everything, their mascots, their everything. So really amazing.
Learning numbers, that was actually a counting exercise, and that's early childhood development, learning as they play, from counting from 1 to 10. And each one of them had a number. The number 1 was 1, the figure, and the name in Shona, which is, oh my God. What do we call one in Shona? You see, the learners know better than I do. But from 1 to 10, it was the number, the name in Shona, and each one of them was representing that. And counting also, putting that those were actually fruits, putting those fruits into the basket, 1 to 10. Which is
so I
really
think
good.
Going from country to country, and we're doing the same in the Amazons with Quechua, and in rural Mexico, and in Central America with Mayan languages. It's doable, it's easy, and it's, I think, is an imperative. It's our responsibility to give back and to rebuild what was killed in centuries or by centuries. I don't even know how to say that, but very important for us. And in Nigeria, we're new, and you can see that it's very new, and the approach is yes and yes. So yes to the tribal languages, yes to the indigenous languages, yes to the native languages, yes to the culture, to the, to the storytelling, to identity, but also yes to helping kids compete in a global economy. So also yes to the English and to the French and to the, in Mozambique we're doing Portuguese and to the Spanish and everything else, but yes and yes, and thanks to technology we can do this. So the last question coming from the audience, which I think is really good, what innovations can we take from Zimbabwe and from Nigeria? I know Nigeria has a big startup scene, so are you aware of any technology that we can inherit on this side of the world?
Well, when we try to stress native languages, one question comes to the fore. For what purpose? Apart from sustaining the culture and making sure that language doesn't go extinct, a language in Nigeria, for instance, that is spoken by less than 500 people, members of the society, will only have its impact within the locality where it is spoken. The time for it to make a breakthrough, to become one of the 3 or 4 official Nigerian languages to be used for news broadcasts, for commerce. For commerce, yes, it can be used for the local area to preserve their culture and well-being. But, for instance, Nigeria adopted English as a national language, spoken by everybody. So for economic, political, legislative, legal, is English. I don't see the time and when soon that Ibibio would become such a legal Nigerian language that will be used for legal purposes, for commercial purposes, except from being spoken within the locality. So it looks like a solution, a long-term solution has been found in Nigeria, where they have said English is official language. From among the languages, we have taken Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba that can be learned in schools, can be learned by students up to PhD level. The rest, try and do what you can to keep it alive, keep the language alive, sustain your culture and tradition with it. But I don't see the day they will push to become one of the key languages. It looks like that has been done for now. Well, the innovation, like the little kids who are dancing here, you can use it to perpetuate your culture, your tradition, the way of those people. Are they from your place?
Yes.
Okay. When are you going to adopt that as the national language?
It is the national language. Yes.
Spoken by everybody in the country or by the community where it is spoken? The majority.
In terms of integration, other parts of the country are also, there are schools that are also learning that language, which is, and then the opposite is true, where the dominant group is also learning in some of the schools the languages of the minority groups.
I see it slightly differently in Nigeria, because it's like it's been decided, it's been taken as a policy that it is Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba as native languages to be spoken by. Yoruba, for instance, is spoken in Dahomey. Hausa is spoken somewhere in some part of the Arabic world. Igbo is spoken some part of Ghana. There are some languages in Ghana that are derived, apart from pushing those few things outside the Nigerian nation. I don't see the much. We have news broadcasts in Igbo, in Hausa, in Yoruba, but apart from the local radio stations that try once in a while to broadcast in the language of the locality, they don't go beyond that, and I don't see the trust. It's been, and those who can speak English very well and can't speak any of these three languages, that's an alternate, which is Pidgin or Creole language, which is used commonly by everybody in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. That is like English for the populace. Mm-hmm. And everybody, the market woman, the man in the farm, don't understand Pidgin English. And that is one thing militating against the development of each other one, because that's a way out. If you can't speak English, you can speak Pidgin English. Mm-hmm. Or you'll be forced to learn one of these three major languages. That is the way.
Great. Well, thank you so much. You're going to have an opportunity to meet them. I think at 7, we have a reception.